So, even though I shouldn't be recording because I had a really rough day and week and month and last couple of years, and I had like a mini crash today, I guess, like for a couple hours. It happens more frequently than it should, but I think it's just because I'm really shitty at pacing, and I think sometimes my anxiety gets the worst of me sometimes, or best of me, whatever, and I have to like do something, so I'll just watch things or something like that. And so like that's very draining on me to watch things. Um, Less draining for me to like read like something physically, but like on my phone, it's just for some reason it's really taxing. And so like for a couple hours, I was just knocked out because and I'm still not feeling well. My symptoms are so weird. Like it does feel like I'm sick all the time, and I get like this really it just burns in the back of my head. So there's some in I don't know if it's inflammation or infection or something. I have no clue. I don't know if it's because like my I've had neck issues for years, but like um, they just became more prominent when I had this illness, and same thing with uh, my like sensitivity to like visual stimuli and stuff like that, and like auditory stimuli. I still wear like earplugs. Obviously, I wear my sunglasses pretty much all the time. You can't see it, but my screen has like the night saver mode on it right now, and it also has like a plastic um, like shield on it, so like it even dims it even more, which is also really shitty because like I can't see a lot of things sometimes when I'm on my computer when I can use it. I guess I'm still fortunate that I'm like it doesn't like disable me entirely. Like I know some people have crashes they just can't move. Like I there like today I was just like I'm just gonna rest, and so I did. I just fell asleep, and like I felt bad because I was gonna go for a walk, but like if I had to go to the bathroom, I could still get up and go to the bathroom and do things and walk downstairs because I still don't have like other comorbidities with it. Like I don't have POTS or anything like that. I think I mentioned that before, but it's fucking a rough illness. I'll say that much, and it's a depressing illness because I'd rather be doing literally anything else than sitting in my room or resting or just wasting away because that's what it feels like. It feels like it's a living death. So, in that segue, I did want to talk about two concepts today that are important because I was trying to fall asleep yesterday, and because I was really tired, and every once in a while I'll get like these like weird thoughts, like intrusive, like what they call like intrusive thoughts. And one of them was like, "Oh yeah, one day I'm gonna die." I mean, not to be morbid, but like, and it jolts me, and I go, "Oh," it gives me a very uneasy feeling. But then like also too, I just realized like that there's like natural deaths, obviously. Like you like my grandmother lived to 90, right? And that was also kind of traumatizing because like I found her body and stuff, but like um but she lived to like a healthy age, right? And my other grandmother, who like kind of struggled like a little later on, but she lived to be like 88, I think. My other aunt lived to be like 87, 88, 89, something like that. Most of my aunts lived to be pretty old, except for like the ones who died like a little younger, like who like had like some health issues. My both my grandfathers died like at 66, 67, like pretty young. But other than that, like there wasn't a lot of like death. Everything was just like kind of like they died of natural causes. I remember like the first funeral I remember going to, anyways, was my great aunt, and she was like 90 or something like that, and she was like a habitual smoker and stuff like that, and she was like in a wheelchair the entire time I knew her. But like but she died of natural causes, right? And like I still have relatives in like Japan who are like in their 90s, right? And so when we think of death, most think of it like in terms of like, oh, I'm gonna die like in my bed at an old age or something like that. And it's like that could be true, right? And so there are natural deaths. But what I wanted to talk today was about social murder or and then social death, right? These are like two different distinct kind of concepts that kind of merge into one another if we can try to do that. So the concept of social murder first comes up in Frederick Engels' book, The Conditions of the Working Class in England. And he is he writes this in 1844, 1845. I think he knows Marx at this point. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not familiar in the chronology because they write the Communist Manifesto in 48. So yeah, they must have known each other at this point, or if not, they shortly thereafter were. I mean, they had like a 40-year working relationship, so I think they had known each other at this point. Um, but anyways, I wanted to read the specific section where he talks about social murder, and it might take like a minute or two, but just bear with me on what it is, and how it relates to now, right? So he says, when one individual inflicts bodily injury upon another such injury that death results, we call that deed manslaughter. When the assailant knew in advance, premeditated, that the injury would be fatal, we call this deed murder. But when society places hundreds of proletarians in such position that they inevitably meet a too early and unnatural death, one which is quite as much a death by violence as that by the sword or bullet, when it deprives thousands of the necessaries of life, places them under conditions in which they cannot live, forces them through the strong arm of the law to remain in such conditions until that death ensues, which is the inevitable consequences, knows that these thousands of victims must perish and yet permits these conditions to remain, its deed is murder just as surely as the deed of the single individual. Disguised, malicious murder, murder against which none can defend himself, which does not seem what it is, because no man can seize the murderer, because the death of the victim seems a natural one, since the offense is more one of omission than of commission. But murder it remains. I now have to prove that society in England daily and hourly commits that what the working men's organs with perfect correctness characterize as social murder, that it has placed the workers under conditions in which they can neither retain health nor live long, that it undermines the vital force of these workers gradually, little by little, and so hurries them to the grave before their time. And he goes on and mentions, and the paragraph goes on, but that's like the salient points, that it is not just an individual act. It is the very political economy that we exist under, right? There's that factor, right? Remember, but this is written in 1844, 45. This is during Dickensian England times. He's talking about the early deaths of children. He's talking about the poor working conditions of people in Manchester, etc. Right. And so he's talking about these really, I mean, this is obviously before OSHA and labor regulations and all these kinds of things. And so um, when he says we don't see the murderer, it's because the murderer is society. It's the existing um, material conditions that we live under daily, right? That make life either shorter or appear as well it was just their time, right? And for a while, right, we saw life expectancy go up for a very long time. I don't know how long of a time, but it was decades of just it never dropped. And now we're starting to see it drop again. Part of that was because of the pandemic, but also part of it is because of our relation to our own activity as laborers, right? And how the state prolongs this misery. And what I mean by that is this: the state is not just in their time. They were talking about the state as this sort of capitalist machine that is this executive committee that just for the bourgeois class. Now it still is that, but it also dominates all of the economy now. The state runs the economy basically, not just domestically but globally. Okay, and it does so part and parcel because it it we live bourgeois economists uh, think we live under an economy of scarcity always and everywhere, and an economy of thrift. We don't. So the state follows this line of logic, right, which is really the logic of capital, right? And so the logic of capital has nothing to do with human needs. You need to rest, fuck you, work. You need healthcare, fuck you, pay for it. Or don't, or die on the fucking street, right? You need medical research advanced, fuck you, right? We're not going to invest a dime unless it's profitable or unless the state subsidizes it. Okay? And so the state creates the conditions for scarcity now, right? But it is still the logic of capital, right? But the state abets in this, right? If we want to continue with this sort of metaphor of crime, the state abets this, and abets labor as reproducing labor as absolute necessity, right? Meaning that everything that you do is either dependent on your own labor or the labor of others. So, as if you're a disabled person, you require the labor of others, right? Because they get taxed or they get whatever, and then that gets redistributed through some sort of welfare state. And you would think, well, what's wrong with that? Well, what's wrong with that is that it's insufficient. It's totally insufficient to our needs, right? It doesn't solve the problems of our needs. It sure as shit doesn't make our lives any like some sort of, utopian sort of existence, right? Oh, we don't have to work. But at the same time, they micromanage our consumption down to the last milligram, right? This is what the state does, right? This is what part of means testing is, right? When they decide whether you qualify for like welfare or something like that. It's barbaric. It's totally barbaric. The entire system is barbaric. So you couple that with the fact that we're living under conditions which has accelerated oncogenesis, which is the state of like how rapid we're going to, and earlier we're going to develop possible potential cancers. We're seeing this in 30 and 40-year-olds right now who are developing cancers much earlier, which gives me anxiety. I'm like in my 30s, so it's like it. And then you see it in the proliferation of neurological diseases. You see it in the proliferation of even muscular neurological disorders. You see it just in diseases in general, anxiety, depression, etc. This is all from, and this, of course, trigger warning, brings up more higher rates of suicidality, right? Because society is not only unstable, it's unhealthy to exist under. This is an environment that we were not supposed to live under. It's totally artificial, right? And it's for not human needs. We're not producing for human needs. We produce for the ends of industry, of capital, and then at the highest level, the state, right? This happens everywhere. There is no country that is exempt from this. Developed nations, anyways, right? People will go, well, what about China, right? They're developing for their people, aren't they? No, they're not. They don't do it for their people. They have growth targets. They have inflation targets. Their growth target is 5% every year. Their inflation targets are 3% every year. Okay? It's the hugest fucking cope in the world to say that China is somehow socialist or something like that, or communist, right? They would actually be producing for human needs and not abstract things like GDP. Okay? So that's part of social murder, right? And then there is also social death, right? Now, social death, maybe I'll bring this up if anyone's seen Philadelphia, right? We're all experiencing social death, but people with disabilities and people, especially with art illness, ME/CFS, long COVID, etc., these sort of invisible illnesses, right? See, at least with HIV or AIDS, right, it became apparent that these people were extremely sick, right? If you've seen the movie Philadelphia, it's because he has lesions on his head and his body. He's becoming gaunt. He's becoming whatever. I've actually gained a ton of weight since I've got ME/CFS. But yeah, he's become extremely gaunt and he's become just physically frail and stuff like that. As his disease progresses, and so it's at least a quasi-visible illness, right? And it's also, it seems because it was so stigmatized as only occurring within the gay community, right? It had a visible element to to that at the level of, okay, we think it's only happening to this group, which is one of the initial reasons why they let it just go. I mean, let it rip because and go untreated for so long because that they thought, well, it doesn't affect the straight community. Why should I care, right? Whereas our illness is a little bit more heterogeneous, even though we know it affects 35 to 45-year-old women most, right? It really does just affect everyone for the most part, not equally, but everyone, right? It comes, but you can't see it because we're hidden, in right? We can't go anywhere and do anything. You have HIV now. You can go. I've known people have HIV, right? Then they just live normal lives, right? Normal-ish lives. Okay, they still have to take medication all the time, but they're able to live normal-ish lives. Okay, with treatment, early treatment. Okay, as long as it doesn't advance to AIDS, they can live to at least, if not 75, in their 70s, maybe, right? And not only that, right, they're able to still do things and be visible in society and still advocate for things. Part of our social death is that we have to disappear from society altogether, right? And so I'll read a line from Philadelphia, which will feed into my next the idea of how the state operates and what I think is occurring right now and how the logic of it is occurring. So Joe Miller, who is played by Denzel Washington, they're in the library and they're trying to look up precedents for the discrimination that he's faced from being fired from his job as a lawyer, right? And so Joe Miller is reading here. He goes, "The Federal Vocational Rehabilitation Act of 1973 prohibits discrimination against otherwise qualified handicapped persons who are able to perform the duties required by their employment. Although the ruling did not address the specific issue of HIV and AIDS discrimination," Andrew Bennett cuts him off, and he says, "Subsequent decisions have held that AIDS is protected as a handicap under law, not only because of the physical limitations it imposes, but because the prejudice surrounding AIDS exacts a social death which precedes," and he pauses because he realizes what he's about to say next, "which precedes the actual physical one." So that's what social death is, right? It's sort of your complete dismissal and erosion and disappearance of your social being within society, right? You basically become a fucking ghost. You don't exist. You still have rights, obviously. We have rights, right? But you basically are a non-being, a non-person, a non-entity. And it's particularly difficult for people with our illness, obviously, based on the fact that it's so debilitating on the symptoms level, and one of them being that we have such energy deficiencies, amongst other, debilitating symptoms for other people, depending on your severity level. So I did want to. So that brings me into the idea of like what social death looks like for us in the context of social murder. And I think that the two are connected by the fact that we live under a political economy right now that is entirely eugenic in its logic, right? And what I mean by that is that if anyone had read the intramural study, right, or had read any other studies that are done by the NIH or these other sort of institutes, right, they're not designed to get us help, right? They're designed to prevent us from being insured. They're designed to prevent us from having any sort of assistance. They're designed to erase us. And that's what social death is. Total, complete erasure, right? And so I did want to share some things that I had bookmarked on Twitter. And so this guy's Dr. Michael, who I follow, he says, "I took eugenics out of my speech because some researchers thought it would ruffle feathers. However, I believe that the use of the utilitarian principle, healthcare rationing, personal responsibility, herd immunity, among more specific actions, are debilitating campaigns." right? Medical provider, and he's quoting this paper here, and he says medical providers must not engage in ruthless utilitarianism in deciding who gets life-saving treatment for the coronavirus. The federal civil rights officer warned, and every single hospital did it anyway. The White House went so far as to assure vulnerable folks, i.e., us, older people, whatever, including those who could not be vaccinated, myself, that they would endure a winter of severe illness and death to preserve capital. Now, this is very important. This is very fucking on point about him, right? Preserve capital, right? Preserve it from what? From deflation. Okay, get your asses back to work. That's the logic, right? The WHO and the CDC boldly lying about how and who can spread respiratory infections was a herd immunity through infection tactic to infect as many children as possible. Never mind that children are a primary vector of respiratory contagion. The Great Barrington Declaration, how public health lost control from the very beginning. Okay? Cuomo infected patients into nursing homes, forced infected patients into nursing homes. The nursing home could not test any such prospective residents, those treated for COVID-19 or those hospitalized for other reasons, right? And then he quotes another, I guess he goes into another something from a couple months back. The shift from no fault of our own to personal responsibility was so fucking sinister. I can't believe everyone was like, oh, okay, cool. It's like we are living through Squid Games, except no one wins anything. That is the logic of eugenics. And the reason why it's important to use a recent example like COVID is because it shows the complete indifference of the state, right? I almost like hesitant to say it, but the state hates us, and they don't care if you know it, right? They don't. They despise. They want us to go away, right? And they say everything's done on a benevolent level, but it's not. And the further proof of that, right? I'll bring up another bookmark here. Hold on. Right, is about the NIH, right? This person, Eileen, who is quoting Jeanette Burmeister, who has really good information about like the NIH study on ME and such illnesses, and why they would put someone like Dr. Wallet in charge of it, right? It's the same old game, basically, right? Eileen was just summarizing, basically. Great blog, Jeanette. NIH is playing long game with long COVID, like they did with ME. Established office for long COVID, form federal advisory committee, fund research with biased, corrupt staff, redefine criteria, rename long COVID, disappear long COVID. Sound familiar? Resist. That's the part of social death, right? The disappear you, right? And the social murder part is that it's enforced by the state. It's completely enforced by the law and the authorities. It's completely legal, right? They make murder legal, ostensibly, right? This is what they did with the death sentence. Everyone's like, well, these people had it coming. But you're giving a monopoly on the state to fucking kill you, okay? And there's one more here. He said by Wanzi Zhu. He says Matthew Paris says the quiet part out loud about euthanasia. We simply cannot afford extreme senescence or desperate infirmity for as many such individuals as our society is producing. Right? This is just like Malthusian garbage. Okay. Not only can we provide for many people, it's what I was talking about before. We live under an economy that produces a consciousness which says that we live under scarcity, and we don't. We just don't, right? Money is abundant, and at the same time, it is scarce, right? Because it can only be used for certain things. That's why money is a barrier, right? That's why we have to fucking get rid of it. If we really want to accelerate the productive forces and really want to like take a leap into the next um, stage of our development as a species and as a society, right? Especially in the medical field. He says Matthew Paris is not a fascist. I don't know what it is. He's being sarcastic here. For society, as much as for an individual, self-preservation must shine a harsh beam onto the balance between input and output. All right. So what he's basically saying here is he's treating us as economic units, right? And that's basically what he's doing. This guy, the author of this guy, who's basically talking about the terminally ill or those who are very ill and wanting to self-terminate, right? Matthew Paris legalized euthanasia to compete with the Chinese economy. Right? So now he's talking about euthanasia as a possibly economic benefit, as a possible driver of growth, even as we're losing people, right? People don't have value. Value has value. Only output has value, right? Things that we sell in the market has value, but people do not. Right, Matthew Paris, the government will not force you to euthanize yourself. Social pressure will be enough, and that's a good thing. And that's the social murder capacity of it, right? Society, the conditions of society will do it for us, right? They'll either drive you insane or you'll get medical neglect, right? Through which is what people with ME have been enduring for years, or if you have Lyme or long COVID or something like that, right? Your medical neglect will be enough for you to like that young girl who was 28 years old I forgot if she was in Sweden and Denmark, but who documented her euthanasia, and she felt there was no other alternative to her severe ME other than to just kill herself, ostensibly, and so that's very sad to me, right? And then again, he's just saying, but yeah, it's just Darwinian bullshit, right? Matthew Paris likes the kill the weak argument for euthanasia so much that he wrote for it in The Spectator in 2015, right? So, yeah, so that's kind of what I wanted to share. It's very frustrating and very alarming that this is the logic that we're now living under, if you want to call it that, because it's simultaneously the logic of capital and simultaneously the logic of anti-humanism or just anti-human in general, right? Anti-human needs, right? That's what capital is. You have to have a theory of that to really grasp it. There is no theory of that's why I don't believe in conspiracy theories, right? People will say, well, it's depopulation, it's whatever. No, it's people. We live under a society where the state is impoverishing so much, right, on behalf of capital, right, that the state not only has to consume more than we consume and restrict our consumption, right, but it makes material living conditions so fucking awful, right, and the standard of living fall off so much, right, and it makes work so fucking tedious and arduous and unnecessary, right, that it produces not only illnesses, but it produces the psychosis that we're better off not being alive, right? And then also that some people don't deserve to be alive, right? It's almost people are so concerned about like, well, if we elect this one guy, Trump or something like that, he's going to he's Hitler. And I was like, no, Hitlerian ideology has been in the United States for a very long time. Right? It's not new. All right. The idea that some people are a drag on the economy, some people are not worth the economic effort to try to keep them going or alive or to make the better their lives or something like that. That's been here for 90 years at least, right? The entire foundation of this country was fucking based on fuck everyone, But to get to the level of that that Hitlerian sort of Naziist sort of eugenics logic, that took time to develop, right? Starting from the point of when Engels wrote his book on the working conditions in England up until the 1930s, because that's when it really starts becoming like, what? This is the logic behind trying to exterminate the Jews, right? Jews are an expression of finance capital. Finance capital is ruining the real economy, right? We have to get rid of these people, right? We have to get rid of the gays, and we have to get rid of the handicapped, and we have to get rid of the elderly and the infirm because they're a drag on production. They don't add any net. They don't add any actual net value, right? Everyone says the Nazis were socialists. They were the most ardent capitalists you can think of, right? That is the logic of fascism. The logic of fascism is to ostensibly prolong the shelf life of capital by any means necessary. That is the logic of it. It's not just state corporatism or a merger between private and public entity. It's to prolong the shelf life of capitalism, right? The first way they do it is cutting your wages, right? Then the downstream effect of that is that it affects your consumption. Then it affects your safety. Then it affects your stability. Then it affects your ability to do things, right, and enjoy a fruitful life, right? And at the level of someone who's handicapped or has a disability, it affects your ability to participate in society. And that's when you get disappeared, right? We talk about people being disappeared in other countries, like these dictatorships or something like that. But we're being disappeared under supposedly a democratic country, right? And so that's basically the connection, I think, between social murder and social death. Now, is it perfect? No. It's almost midnight and I'm tired and I had a rough day and I don't feel like and I didn't write any of this down. Basically, I just had some ideas on it, and I wanted to talk about it because it's important, and I'm angry about it, and it's very upsetting, and I don't want to die young, and I would like to live my life. I would like to go do things, and I would like society to give a shit about me, and I would like to not have all these hindrances, and I would like to not have the state determining whether I am worthy of existing. Okay. And especially not capitalism, and especially not this society being determinant of whether I should have, treatment as someone who's sick, and whether my life has any value or worth. Okay. And so if you're out there and you do listen to my vlog, which is really just for me basically, but it's for everyone too, but it's mostly for myself to keep some recording of like my situation, because part of this is to bear witness to the fact that people with MECFS exist, right? And so if you're out there, I'm not going to tell you to hang on, but I will tell you that I empathize with you, because this is unfair, and the society is murderous as fuck, and the society is awful. But that doesn't mean you should give up necessarily hope per se. But you should. But then again, I wouldn't know how to tell you how to fight it, because we're not in like a great position to do it. It's so maybe this is more for people who agree with the ideology of that guy I just quoted, Paris, who thinks that we should all just off ourselves for the betterment of the economy, the betterment of this abstract unit of measurement of growth of GDP and profit, and input and outputs and stuff like that. Maybe it's for you guys instead who see it, and then maybe you'll have a change of heart and demand something better for us and act on our behalf, because a lot of us can't advocate on our own behalf. And I'm just tired of reading about people in not just the MECFS community, but the long COVID community. I know they overlap a little bit, but in just the chronic illness or people who are impoverished, just saying, I can't hang on anymore. I can't do this anymore. I consider myself a strong person, but I'm strong to a point. I've endured a lot during my life, even preceding this. And so, I hope you found some of this informative. I hope and I hope that everyone's doing as well as they can. And I think my next blog is going to be a little bit more lighter. I'm going to be talking about maybe some things that I enjoy. But have a good Easter if you celebrate it. If you don't, just rest up and do the best you can. All right. Bye.